The Denver Broncos have finally addressed the right tackle position by making a key free agent signing, and now there will be an open competition heading into training camp between three potential right tackles. Which move is the best here for this Denver Broncos football team? Plus, what type of flexibility does the Broncos offensive line have going into 2022? We break that down and much more on today's brand new episode, Locked On Broncos.
You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, Broncos country? Welcome back into a brand new episode, Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast here on the Locked On NFL Network, your team every day. From the South Stands to the end zone, I'm your host, as always, Cody Roark, joined alongside by my co-host, Sayre Bedinger. Both of us, we cover the Denver Broncos for the Locked On Network and 9 News. Broncos country, thank you so much for making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day every single day on your favorite audio podcasting platform, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or watching us here on YouTube in 4K high definition. All you got to do is hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out on a day's worth of Denver Broncos news, content, and coverage. Plus, if you're a subscriber here, once we hit 10K subs, you are going to have a chance to win a free Russell Wilson Color Rush jersey giveaway. We appreciate you so much, Broncos country. Hey, Sayre, coming into this weekend, I think we're really looking forward to seeing, hey, are the Broncos going to make a move at right tackle? Well, guess what? Last night, they finally did. They brought back a familiar face here, and Billy Turner on a one-year deal worth up to $5 million, and now he comes back to Denver after spending several years away, where he left Denver initially, and now he's grown into a very good player and well-loved by guys like Aaron Rodgers, and I'm sure Russell Wilson in the future.
And I wonder if he's still good buddies with some of the guys that are still on the Broncos, from his time in Denver. I still remember back when he was getting cut by the Dolphins and then by the Baltimore Ravens. He was there for like a week, and then he comes to Denver. And I felt like, man, this is the kind of risk-reward option I love that the Broncos take. Billy Turner, a former high third-round draft pick out of North Dakota State. So he's from my neck of the woods, Cody. I'm from South Dakota. North Dakota State's not too far away. So it's really cool to see him come back. You love the reunion. I believe this is the first Nathaniel Hackett Packers guy to come to Denver, if I'm not mistaken, unless I'm not thinking correctly off the top of my head. You can correct me if I'm wrong on that one, but I think this is the first Packers guy from last season to come over to Denver.
No, it certainly is here, too. And there's familiarity and some background here on the story of Billy Turner. Obviously, we know that former Seattle Seahawks offensive tackle Brandon Shell came in for a visit earlier on in the week, but apparently Billy Turner came in earlier last week and did a medical visit with the Broncos, and everything checked out. We did know that he was released by the Green Bay Packers on a failed physical designation. I think, as you mentioned early on this week here with Billy Turner, I wonder if that was just a little bit of a safeguard for them to release him to have salary cap space for Green Bay, but now he's a Denver Bronco. And look, the Broncos have 3 tackles right now that are on one-year deals, and we'll talk about the impact that maybe each of these guys can have and maybe how it's going to play out, but it appears that there's going to be a competition. I want to focus on Billy Turner here for a moment, though. We have seen him grow, and as you mentioned, going around from the Dolphins to the Ravens to Denver, and then all of a sudden, there was a storyline. And I remember talking to Matt McChesney over there, 6'0" strength, and obviously a good friend of mine. Loved Matt McChesney, how open he is. He trains a lot of offensive linemen around the NFL, college football, local high school products as well in Denver, does a fantastic job. Billy Turner's been training with him. So it's like, even though in the offseason when he was with the Green Bay Packers, he would still come to Denver and train with Matt McChesney. So it's good to have him back here in the Mile High City. And he really found success after the 2018 season when the Broncos decided to move away from him and they decided to go after Juwan James, which to me, I think was the more surprising thing. I think in hindsight, if the Broncos could have done it all over, if John Elway could have hit a time machine button and rewinded, he probably would have stuck with Billy Turner, because Billy Turner went on to have success with the Green Bay Packers. And man, he did everything for Green Bay. He played right tackle. He played guard. He played left tackle when David Bakhtiari got hurt. And Aaron Rodgers has a lot of love and respect for him, and obviously, was one of those guys that he really valued. So, like I said, this is a good move here for this Denver Broncos team, but, they made their decision between Shell and Turner, and obviously Hackett and Justin Outten. They went with what's familiar.
They did, and it really, you bringing up that 2019 offseason, Cody, gives me just kind of flashbacks to, obviously the Broncos went out and they got what they felt was the best fix at the time, right? They paid the most money at the time to a right tackle in NFL history after, just before or after the Raiders made Trenton Brown the highest paid.
That was
So that was
horrible.
not a good offseason for the teams signing right tackles. But man, for Billy Turner to leave Denver and then go to a similar offense, right? That was the kind of weird thing about it, is that he went and played right tackle, like you said, right guard, left tackle in Matt LaFleur's offense, and Nathaniel Hackett obviously there with him. But he obviously played in a similar offense to what the Broncos were transitioning to at the time under Rich Scangarello and the offense that they wanted to bring in. So they could have re-signed Bobby Turner for a much, more reasonable price. But yeah, I mean, hindsight is always 2020, I suppose. I mean, I'm glad the Broncos have him back now. I'm glad he obviously checked out physically. This is going to be a good move, I think, Cody. Just the way the right tackle position is shaping up. You've obviously got these 3 one-year deals, and we're going to talk about that competition coming up. Man, I think it's a good move for Denver just financially. It's up to $5 million on this deal. So 1 year up to $5 million. I don't think you can necessarily beat that in terms of now you've got a guy that's a true proven starter in this offense specifically. I think this is a great move for George Payton and Nathaniel Hackett.
Billy is back in Denver. I'm excited about that too. I'm a big fan of Billy Turner. I was very kind of frustrated that they actually let him walk, going into the 2019 season. I thought that was a terrible move, and it was a very puzzling move, especially from other Broncos offensive linemen, to make the decision for Juwan James. In hindsight, there were a lot of Broncos offensive linemen like, I don't know what the heck they were doing, but they messed up by letting Billy Turner go. So now he reunites in Denver. But now you mentioned the 3 offensive tackles that the Broncos have at right tackle specifically. Well, it appears that there's going to be competition at training camp for who gets the start. We take a look and we make a case for each of the offensive tackles coming up here in just a moment. But before we do that, let me tell you about betonline.net, the sponsor of today's episode, Locked On Broncos. And it's that time of year again. College basketball's tournament is finally upon us. We see the heartbreaks. We see the big-time upsets. And that is the drama that we see here in the month of March with college basketball. From all the latest odds, contests, and player props, BetOnline is the number one source for all your sports betting needs and information. And BetOnline.net remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games, plus MLB, NBA, NHL. They have everything for the sports fan that loves to put money on the line with betonline.net. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. The Broncos will have a 3-person competition at the right tackle position heading into training camp, it appears, now with the signing of Billy Turner, official here for this Denver Broncos football team. Broncos country, as you get into the second half action on today's episode, Lockdown Broncos. Once again, a mile-high salute to you. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode, Lockdown Broncos, every single day, making it your first listen of the day. We appreciate you for all the interaction we get on YouTube, Twitter, social media. We love you. We appreciate it. Keep it coming in here as well. And Sayre, I think I'd be remiss if we don't talk about for a moment kind of a scary thing before we get into the right tackle competition in Dove Valley. Obviously at the Empower Field a mile high at the stadium, there was a fire that broke out and it burnt hundreds of seats, I believe up to 200 seats according to Mike Kliss, and 8 suites got damaged. There was smoke coming out of the stadium. When I saw that, I was like, whoa, I don't know if this has ever happened in professional sports and in professional football. But the Broncos Stadium is on fire. And originally there was a stadium tour that was ongoing. And this girl, she posted a video of saying, hey, there's a fire over there. And all of a sudden it escalated and it got bigger. Luckily, the fire was contained, and it is expected that all the seats and the suites will be repaired by the start of the season, and there will be no kind of carryover there. So obviously that's huge. I couldn't imagine. But obviously, social media doing what it does. We saw some, Russ is already cooking memes that were coming out on social media. So a little bit of fun there, but luckily it wasn't as bad as it could have been. So thank you to the firefighters for putting that fire out there. But Sayre, I guess we can talk about the Broncos competition here at the right tackle position. We talked about, obviously, Billy Turner coming in there. I think we got to ask the question, in your opinion, and I'll give mine afterwards, who is best suited for the starting right tackle spot in your opinion? And obviously, Broncos country, we want you to chime in here on YouTube, so make sure you comment along or here in the live chat as well.
Well, I think for me, Cody, this is something that I know George Payton had talked back at the scouting combine just a few weeks before that Russell Wilson trade, when the Broncos had a first-round pick and they had 2 second-round picks. He talked about the right tackle position, and he said, we're really looking to find somebody that can fill that spot for the next 5 to 6 years. So I don't think the Broncos are really wanting to go year to year at the position. Although at this point, like you mentioned in segment 1, these guys are all 3 on 1 year contracts. But to me, the obvious answer to your question position is Billy Turner. I think he's the obvious choice to be the starter, to kind of pencil in. If we were to pencil in a starting 5 offensive linemen, I would put Billy Turner as the starting right tackle. Like you said, he did a great job in Green Bay these past few years, and if he's healthy, I think he's the most proven option that you have at that position. The other part of me wants to say Calvin Anderson because he's the younger guy, maybe a little bit more upside. We've seen some really good things from him when he's been given opportunities, but he hasn't been given the opportunity to go through training camp and really be that guy that's, hey, you're gonna grind away as the number one guy, unquestioned. I mean, he battled with Bobby Massey last year, and obviously he became the swing tackle. So I feel like the veteran Billy Turner, even though Tom Compton's another veteran in that group, I feel like Billy Turner is the guy with the most experience. He's obviously going to translate to this offense flawlessly, without any sort of issues whatsoever, I guess we could say, and scheme wise, with Nathaniel Hackett and Justin Houghton coming over. So to me, Billy Turner is the clear answer as we're penciling things in here in late March.
I think for me too, I'm looking at Billy Turner. I think that it probably the writing on the wall up to $5 million. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he's actually going to be paid more than Calvin Anderson and I believe Tom Compton combined, if I'm not mistaken. I'll have to double check that there. So it kind of
Yeah.
maybe says, hey, the proof is in the pudding, the devil's in the details there. I mean, a couple of those little, analogies that we like to make here. But I will say, let's make a case for each of these players here individually. Calvin's case, we're going to take it to court here. He's been with the team now. This will be his 4th season as a member of the Denver Broncos, and he has proven to be reliable when putting into games. I mean, there's been last-minute changes where he has to be the right tackle. I mean, I remember the season where he came in and that he had to step in at right tackle on the road in Las Vegas. I remember it didn't end well for Denver, but he showed some promise there. He showed flashes, and he battled pretty well against Max Crosby. I remember that specifically. But then let's go back to more recent member here in 2021. He's played at right tackle in various times, especially when Bobby Massey was out. And then he had to move over to the left tackle spot against the Dallas Cowboys, against Randy Gregory, against their pass rush and aggressive defense. And man, I tell you what, he put on a clinic there. So it goes to show that, hey, he does have this upside. And I do believe that George Payton values that. However, this is a new coaching staff. It's no longer Mike Munchak, Chris Cooper. Butch Berry's the guy that's making all the calls now here for this offensive line alongside the consultation of Justin Houghton and Nathaniel Hackett. But I wonder if that process will be different. I know when we talk about competition, if Vic Fangio and his staff were here, competition would say, hey, it's open, but we would really know it would be probably Billy Turner the entire way, who would probably be the starter. So I wonder if this will actually be a legitimate competition, if they'll actually get these guys, reps and opportunities. I think regardless, you need to try. And look, I think if you have Billy Turner come in as the starter, you need to see what you have with these other guys as well. And so let's now transition now to Tom Compton. This is Compton's case here, Sayre. Now, I think for him, when we look at the dichotomy, he understands the offensive playbook and the scheme for playing with Kyle Shanahan in San Francisco. He understands how this scheme works. He understands, especially with the blocking side of things, for this to set up the run game, to set up the play action. He understands that he's had starting experience and being a rotational guy within this offense due to injuries, having to step up on that offensive line. So he's proven to be reliable in San Francisco. You get him at a really good market value deal on this 1-year deal here. Makes sense. Like, hey, you do have an option. I feel like if anybody, like whoever the starter is, if someone goes down, you're going to be like, hey, they have really good options at the 2 and 3 spot at right tackle behind them. So there's that with Tom Compton. But let's talk about Billy Turner. As you mentioned, he played under Nathaniel Hackett and Justin Houghton the last couple of seasons here in Green Bay, more familiarity with them, and their up-close experience with them, I think, gives them a better idea as to how they can blend what they plan to do with Russell Wilson and with this scheme. So, I mean, really, Billy Turner kind of makes the most sense here, and I think Broncos country would agree.
I think they will too, and that's really not a bad thing at this point to have that. If you want to call it a competition, like you said, we'll call it a competition, but we'll see kind of after OTAs where that competition really stands and see where what the team is saying or how many reps Billy Turner gets at OTAs, which we know doesn't necessarily mean everything. But I
Yeah.
don't know that necessarily that you want to go into training camp with your offensive line kind of in a rotation. I don't
No.
know. I mean, not that you don't want competition, but with Russell Wilson under center, I feel like you want to get those guys the most cohesion that you possibly can. And we know that it's not just always inserting guys here and inserting a guy there and it just works. Those guys have to communicate a lot on the offensive line, and it requires them to be basically as one mind. So I'm all for getting the offensive line set in place before you get to training camp and then kind of see what happens after that. And we know Tom Compton has positional versatility. I mean, he's not just a swing tackle. This man started 14 games at left guard for the Minnesota Vikings back when obviously George Payton was still there as the assistant GM and everything.
Oh, the
So
ties that
he
bind.
the ties that bind. So it's not even just Butch Berry with this guy. So I think that this is great. It's a great move for the Broncos. It gives you depth. It gives you options. Honestly, feel like the Broncos right now, maybe you have some trade assets on that interior offensive line now with Tom Compton on the 1-year deal, Calvin Anderson as your clear swing tackle, and Compton able to play tackle as well. Then you've got, obviously on the inside, you got Lloyd Cushenberry, Dalton Reisner, you've got Quinn Miners, Netani Muti, you've got Graham Glasgow. So many guys on that interior that, man, this is a deep group on the offensive line. One of the best I think the Broncos have had.
Man, I tell you what, we talk about just all those options in the offensive line. You know what that provides? That provides flexibility. So how can the Broncos maybe use that to their advantage next season? Sayre, Bedinger, myself, we're going to talk about that coming up here in just a moment. But real quick, let me give a special shout out to the other sponsor of today's episode of the show. That is our good friends over there at Built Bar. And have you tried the Built Bar Puffs? They just released the Brownie Batter Puffs at Built.com. And if you haven't, you're missing out on one of Built Bar's best tasting bars. Not to mention, the Puffs are the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, they're marshmallowy, and they're not just a protein bar, they're a treat, and they're covered in 100% real chocolate. Also, Built Bar has 9 amazing original flavors, plus the occasional limited time flavor at Built.com. Not to mention, it's healthy for you and contains massive packing protein, 17 grams of protein, 130 calories, and only 4 grams of sugar. That is enough to get you a little bit of extra fuel to get through your day, to get through a workout, and here on this Friday to help get you through the day, to prepare you for the weekend. And you can go to Built.com here today. And when you go to checkout, make sure you enter promo code LOCK15, and that's going to get you 15% off your next order at Built.com. What type of flexibility does the Broncos offensive line currently have coming into the 2022 NFL season? As we jump into the fourth quarter action on today's episode, Lockdown Broncos, once again, a major shout out here to Broncos Country. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Sayre, we were talking about the tackle options here for Denver, and with that, we even mentioned the rest of the offensive line. And right now, the Broncos have so many different options, and it's really hard, especially with the new O-line coach and Butch Berry, to kind of pinpoint, and Ben Still is an assistant, obviously Grand Junction guy. Hey, Ben Still, appreciate you. Let's grab coffee next time you're in town, my man. Outside of that, I think that they have so many options to figure out what the true identity, what the nucleus of this offensive line will be with Russell Wilson. That's super important, right? Because I think the goal, ultimately, you want to be able to run the football really well, and you want to be able to protect your quarterback. That's going to be super critical here, especially for Russell Wilson, who in Seattle, they didn't have that type of consistency year in and year out. So now Denver has to really try to build on that to preserve their investment in trading for Russell Wilson here. Regardless of how the competition at right tackle goes here, Sayre, the Broncos have flexibility. You mentioned Tom Compton, his ability to play guard, is Billy Turner, the ability to play left, right tackle, and even be able to play guard. Calvin Anderson, the ability to play the swing tackle, left tackle, or right tackle. Then you mention guys on the offensive line. I mean, Graham Glasgow is a guy that we've talked about as well. You know, he restructured his contract to return to Denver here this upcoming season to help them out. There's rumors of him moving from the guard position since Quinn Miners has really stepped up at that right guard, and I believe the Broncos view him as the starter there. There's going to be maybe some competition between Lloyd Cushenberry and Graham Glasgow at center. But then there's the question, what about left guard? I know that there's a lot of pressure on Dalton Reisner from the fan base. I think from the perception, he hasn't performed, I think, to the standard that many people have thought. And I think that there's also this thing, when you change the scheme up, where we saw Dalton Reisner have a lot of success was in this type of offensive scheme, this type of offense that Rich Scangarello had ran, but now you're going to get a little bit more of I'd say a more advanced running of it. Could Dalton Reisner return to form here? Or do the Broncos look at Netani Muti, who has a lot of promise and potential and is a mauler? I mean, Sayre, I think this is a really good problem to have for the Broncos, but it also poses the scenario, hey, there could be one guy that, has been on this offensive line, or there could be somebody that, unfortunately gets released, because I don't think you can carry as many guys as you can right now, especially with the 90-man roster heading into training camp.
And we haven't even got to the NFL draft yet, which is
Oh
really,
my
really
goodness.
deep on the offensive line. So, I mean, man, there could be even more guys coming in. That's where I bring up those trade rumors. To me, Cody, when I talk about this offensive line, or when we talk about it, I look at it as this way. When we get to the preseason games and the second unit comes in, you got to believe that everybody that's on your backup offensive line can start for you for an extended period of time in the regular season. Why? Because that's probably going to happen at some point or another. We've seen that almost every year. It's very, very rare for your entire offense, much less your offensive line, who are playing that very physical position group, to stay healthy all season long. So when that second unit steps out onto the field, and for me, from left to right, it's going to be Calvin Anderson, Netani Muti, Graham Glasgow at the center, and then at right guard, maybe Tom Compton, and then right tackle. I mean, it could be Drew Himmelman, the new rookie, or it could be, it could be anybody. So, it's a combination of different things, but I think that depth that you have gives you the flexibility to say, we really like a lot of these guys. And man, if I'm remembering this wrong, correct me, but when Russell Wilson was in Seattle, the offensive line was a constant topic of discussion in a negative way.
Yeah.
So this is something that I think Russell Wilson will be excited about, to have true depth on that offensive line. And with these guys coming in, it's really great for the Broncos. Now you can go into the NFL draft. I think even as the roster stands right now, Cody, I think even as it is right now, the offensive line flexibility that you have, it gives you the opportunity to go into the draft and say, we can take whatever position group we want. And the Broncos don't pick early by any means, but so that doesn't really matter. You're still going in with the thought and the idea, we can take the best player available. I think this move of Billy Turner really solidifies just a comfort, help you sleep at night about the offensive line, knowing you got so many options and such versatility.
There were some fans. There was like this really angry guy in our YouTube comment section the other day saying, "Oh, the Broncos don't have a right tackle." I was like, "Hey, angry guy, guess what? They just got a right tackle. Simmer down here. Always keep it respectful in the comments, people. Like, no need to be disrespectful. Like, come on. We're all having conversation." He's like, but he said, like, screw your jersey. I guess, you know what? I guess it may just eliminate that guy from the jersey competition. I don't know. I might give him another opportunity there. But if there's a Broncos fan out there that can do a Photoshop for Sayre and I with the True Detective, the show on HBO, but change it to True Depth and showcase all the people on the Broncos offensive line, I will promote the heck out of it on my Twitter feed at Cody Roark NFL, at Lockdown Broncos, at Sayre Bedinger. If you could do that, we'd love you forever more than we already do. But Broncos country, that will wrap up today's episode of the Lockdown Broncos podcast here on your favorite podcasting platform in audio format, where you get us every single weekday, plus on YouTube, where you get to see us in 4K, high definition video quality. We get to interact with Broncos country as well here on the YouTube channel. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications so you never miss out on all the action, all things orange and blue. And guess what? Yes, we are a podcast that is around every single weekday all year long, because for the true fan, there's never an off season. Broncos country, enjoy your weekend ahead. Could the Broncos make more moves? I know that we talked about the chef's kiss here, Sayre, but if the Broncos can add in Bryce Callahan maybe this weekend, which could be a possibility, it'll be a double chef's kiss, my friend, and I can't wait to break down all the action. On Monday's episode, Lockdown Broncos, Sayre and I, we're going to begin grading the Broncos' moves for NFL free agency. We're going to take a look first on the defensive side of the ball. Could they make more moves this weekend? We'll have it covered here on the Lockdown Broncos podcast.